Turns out that I've had a reaction to the COVID vaccine. It was terrifying. I had over 40 different symptoms that happened. They happened within hours of the vaccine. At one point, not being able to walk and not being able to function and having these horrible reactions. This was quite interesting about the inquiry. Nobody denied the harms. None of the expert witnesses that were called when they were asked to talk about adverse reactions, they all acknowledged that they happened.
You've been lied to. You've been lied to by the media, government, and institutions. They want you to consume, obey, stay safe, stay silent. But if you're here, I know you're neither here to stay silent or asleep. Hit subscribe right now and join our mailing list at danastingregory.com/podcast to help us to beat the algorithm and make sure you don't miss the conversations that actually matter. Welcome to the Dan Astin-Gregory podcast. Live free and prosper. Caroline Pover was told the COVID jab was safe. Hours later, she was in an ambulance. What they told her next changed everything. This isn't a conspiracy theory. She isn't an anti-vaxxer. Caroline believed in the science. She trusted the system until the system abandoned her. In this powerful conversation, Caroline shares the raw truth of her vaccine injury, the gaslighting, the cover-up, and the long road to reclaiming her health and her voice. We also talk about her new book, Worth a Shot, Secrets of the Clinical Trial Participant Who Inspired a Global Movement, and the untold story of Brianne Dressen, a woman who volunteered for the COVID vaccine trial and paid the ultimate price. This is the side of the vaccine story they didn't want you to hear until now.
I'm here with Caroline Pover today. Back in 2021, you had a vaccine and had an adverse reaction at a time when the world was unwilling to confront vaccine injuries. Where are we now? Is the world now opening up to the fact that many people have been harmed by this intervention, or are we still stuck in 2021?
No, I don't think we're stuck in 2021 at all. I think there's been too many people that it's affected. So I don't think it can be ignored anymore. I think people are more aware, and I think they're more open to talking about it. Whether that's people that have been injured or people who've lost loved ones or the medical profession, politicians. I see a general public that are more willing to talk about it now.
How does that contrast with what first happened when you learned of your diagnosis?
Well, when I was the first people who told me that I was having an adverse reaction were the paramedics. And my reaction to them was to question it. I didn't believe them.
Wow.
Yeah. So that in itself has completely changed. So my knowledge about vaccine injuries completely changed over the last 4 years. And I think when I started telling people about it, about what had happened to me, people's reactions then are completely different from how they are now. When I tell people now what happened to me, 9 times out of 10, they'll turn around. These are complete strangers. They'll turn around and say, this has happened to me, or I know somebody this has happened to. It's a very small minority of people now who will say, I've never heard of anything like that. And they seem to be genuinely shocked. So I see it as a very different culture now.
Do you think, because Bree's story was similar, right out the gate in chapter 1, she talks about her experience and she was a clinical trial participant, but because of our own belief in the process at the time, she questioned whether it was even the vaccine that caused this problem. Is that a common experience that you found amongst people who have been injured, or is there a wider knowing that this has caused the problems that people are now facing?
I think a lot of people, they're not sure. I think there might be a little bit of a hint. And somehow vaccine injured people are have got this image that, oh, well, you went into it worried, you thought something bad was going to happen, you questioned vaccines anyway, so that's why something's happened to you. But it seems to be the opposite.
Right.
That most people have gone in thinking that, oh, this is fine, and they're not aware of the kinds of issues that can happen. And so it's a bit of a shock. There's a bit of denial. There might be a little something in the back of your mind thinking, you know what, I haven't quite been right since then, or it happened quite soon after that. But a lot of people it's not like they know straight away, yes, that was the vaccine, that was it. Usually somebody will say something to them. And in my case, it was medical professionals who pointed it out to me. And the majority of people, definitely in the support group that I help run, the majority of those have had it pointed out to them either on their records or in a conversation with a medical professional.
Okay. And when we first spoke, obviously a lot of the vaccine reactions come with a physical manifestation, but there's a mental and emotional component to it significantly as well, particularly if it's a life-altering injury. And when we first spoke, you were still dealing with that mental and emotional fallout. Do you feel comfortable now telling us what happened to you, telling your story about how you were affected?
I don't particularly like personally to go back there too much. I generally say I had over 40 different symptoms that happened. They happened within hours of the vaccine. Most of them did. Other ones came along kind of in the days and the weeks afterwards. And the ones that happened weeks afterwards, they lingered, and then they developed into this chronic condition that literally affected every part of my body from my head to my toes. And it was physical and it was psychological, and the emotional and psychological impact. It felt partly chemical. It felt almost like a brain hijack had happened. But it felt like a very physical, chemical thing that was going on, and it was terrifying. And there were thoughts that I had that felt completely alien to me. So there was that element of it, but it felt very much like a physical thing.
Yes.
And then I suppose the more emotional side of things came afterwards as a result of the reaction and of the, not being able to walk and not being able to function and having these horrible reactions to food, which sounds like something not very important, but it's actually quite terrifying when things that you've eaten your whole life and never had a problem with, suddenly they're bringing about these horrific reactions.
Gosh.
And not feeling supported and not having any answers and feeling incredibly isolated. The emotional impact of all of that came much later. And that's an understandable reaction that anybody would have if everything about their physical being had completely been turned upside down. So they couldn't do, and I was a runner, I couldn't run to, that's always isn't exercise very good for dealing with difficult things, or spending time with friends. That would really help. And you don't have access to any of those things if you're vaccine injured. So of course there's going to be an emotional impact. And it was really hard, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Brie had a very similar story. I remember reading about her trying to get on her exercise bike, something she's used countless times, and she's trying to nudge the pedals into motion, but struggling to even get into movement. So she was also affected physically, mentally, emotionally. The kind that she talked about this almost like electric shock running through her body, and that still affects her today.
She still now has the electric shock feeling.
What does the medical profession make of this? Is it actually a recognizable syndrome? Is it a collection of ailments is there a common pattern to some of these injuries?
I think there are some papers coming out, and there was a little bit of research, particularly in America, happening that's recognizing as different names for it, but some kind of syndrome that's related to reactions to the vaccine. So there's a little bit coming about, but it's not enough. There needs to be a lot more research. There isn't anybody that's getting enough of us together to try and find out what are the commonalities, what are the symptoms that are very similar amongst people, and there isn't enough going on, but it is more recognized by the medical profession. I think there are certain groups of the general public where it's not recognized, but I think in the medical profession it is a lot more recognized now. It's just that there isn't enough research, and without research there isn't going to be a lot of treatment if you want to go the pharmaceutical route. I think there are lots of things that you can do that are non-pharmaceutical route in terms of managing symptoms. I hesitate to use the word recovery, but healing and managing symptoms and getting a better quality of life back. There's plenty of us who are doing that and have done that.
I mean, it's incredible to hear that. I mean, many of you, from what I've witnessed, you've had to go on your own voyage of discovery through experimentation and learning different approaches, protocols, knowledge sharing, because of that void in the medical knowledge at the outset.
We have, and it, in some ways, that and it is very unfair that we haven't had more support. But in some ways, it's given some of us an opportunity to learn a lot more about our bodies, to learn about health, to learn about not just how our physical being works, but how our emotional being works and our spiritual being as well. So some of us have gone on, you can call it a bit of a journey and a healing journey that encompasses all different elements of our health.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at the rollout, I was witnessing from the outside this cascade of misinformation from the mainstream press. They failed to address the problem. They denied the problem from my perspective from the outside. How did it feel for you at that point, having been through this experience? How did you feel about the media response to it? Did you feel like there was a open window to discuss these things? How did you feel the media response was to people who were suffering like yourself?
Well, there wasn't any. At the beginning, there wasn't any. You just didn't see anything about anybody that was suffering from the vaccine at all. And I have friends in the media, in the mainstream media, and I remember contacting people and saying, I haven't seen anything about vaccine injuries in the media here. What is there? I can't possibly be the only person in the world who's dealing with this. And one of them, I remember very clearly, came back to me and said, we're not allowed to talk about it.
Gosh.
Given that we're talking about health today, I want to take a moment to talk about a brand that's been an absolute game changer for me when it comes to supporting my health naturally. Introducing Adaptogenic Apothecary. I've personally been using their products for months now, and I can honestly say that they have made a real difference in my well-being, my energy, my overall health. Their adaptogenic blends help manage stress, boost energy, and improve mental clarity, making it easier to stay focused and calm throughout my day. I especially love Power, which helps with energy and athletic performance, and Calm, which is my go-to for stress relief and improving my sleep. These products are packed with medicinal mushrooms, adaptogens, and Afron, which are all proven to help support the body's natural rhythms and to restore balance. But what really sets Adaptogenic Apothecary apart is their focus on hormonal health for women. The founders, Jody and Paris, started this journey after experiencing shifts in their bodies post-40, sleepless nights, brain fog, irritability, and they turned to plant-based medicine for relief. That's when they created Harmony, a powerful supplement designed to support each phase of the menstrual cycle. With ingredients like Afron, medicinal mushrooms, and adaptogens, these blends help women to stay balanced, energized, all naturally, of course. And if you want to optimize your health and experience the benefits of these products yourself, you can get 10% off your first order by using discount code DAG, that's DAG, all in capitals, at adaptogenicapothecary.com and give them a try. You'll find the link below. I highly recommend these products for anyone looking to boost their health naturally and to feel more balanced every single day. Now back to the show.
That was very confusing. Now there's a lot more coverage in mainstream, and particularly after the inquiry, there was a real flurry of coverage, and I think that continues now. Yeah. So things, again, that's another area that's really changed.
I mean, it feels like an echo of time now, then. I still hear it echoing in my mind, this repeat mantra that it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective. And that was this impenetrable barrier of information that or noise that prevented people to actually get real information that they needed to make informed judgments. I mean, how do you feel looking back at that now, knowing that people made choices that they may not have done if they'd had more representative information?
I actually don't personally put too much of my energy, emotional energy, into looking back on that. I look forward, and what can I do to just make sure that anybody who is suffering knows that they're not suffering alone. They don't have to suffer alone, that there's support available. They don't need to do it on their own. So I don't I haven't. I've always been trying to kind of move forward. What can I do to communicate in a compassionate way about what has happened to people? Make sure they know that they're not alone, and to help them find ways that they can move forward as well. My energy's been a lot more about that, and I think that's part of kind of coming to terms with what's happened in my life, and how do I find a way to move forward that's going to be healing for me. And my way of moving forward isn't actually to be spending too much time dwelling on that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, it does make sense. I think for a lot of people, however, they look back and they think there was this huge period of denial. And I can only imagine what it felt like in that situation to have almost be gaslit about your situation, almost rejected that you've got a problem. I mean, that was what I was witnessing in the kind of mainstream press. I was thinking, how are you denying this is happening? You can see it, you can feel it, you can. So from the outside, I was feeling devastated for those that were harmed, devastated.
I think we all have to find our own ways to come to terms with what's happened over the last 5 years. And I think this is just how I feel about it. I think that we need to come to terms with what's happened, and we need to find a way to process our own emotions in a way that means that we can move on and we're not held back in that time. It doesn't mean forgetting anything that's happened. It doesn't mean forgiving anybody necessarily. But it means kind of forgiving yourself, because if you're stuck in that space, you spend a lot of time regretting things. You spend a lot of time feeling very angry at yourself, and that is going to impact your healing in a not very helpful way. And if you're in the injured community, then your healing is really important. So maybe that's where we're a little bit different, is that you haven't had a physical, serious, life-threatening on multiple occasions health condition to have to deal with over the last 4 years.
Yep.
So maybe that's why the actions that went on before then are still hurting you, and they're still very much in your forefront, when you've actually had to live in the middle of it and live and be in survival every day. Perhaps your focus becomes a little bit more about how do I move forward in a very positive, warm, healing way that protects my energy and my body.
I'm trying to get to that place.
Well, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But I've had a motivation to do that. I've had, I remember feeling my heart pounding and knowing that and it was about something not related to the vaccine, it's something else. I was getting worried about something and stressed about something, and I could feel my heart going, and I decided, right, I can't let my heart do that, because that's going to impact my body's ability to heal from this other thing that happened to me 6 months ago.
Yes.
So I have to get that under control. So my motivation was to protect my body.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we were talking earlier. For me personally, I do get angry about what's happened, and not just the vaccine story, but the overall gravity of what happened during COVID. But I've had to transmute that anger into something positive as well, and constructive, in order to be able to take some positive action relating to what's happened, but also to make sure I don't become mentally and emotionally drained by it, because there has been times in the last five years where I've actually got sick because of my feelings. And I know it's a toxic emotion. So I've had to come to terms with what's happening from the outside, and I have a very different experience. As you say, I was looking at it from the outside, and the scale of what was happening and the number of people that were impacted, and witnessing the injustice of this. And actually, frankly, if I look back, my brain wasn't looking at how do we heal these people right now. Sadly, I was looking at how do we fight the people that have caused this, as opposed to what's the best thing we can do for people like you, who are going through immense pain and suffering, and probably feeling alienated, left behind, all manner of things. I mean, how do you even begin to describe that situation that you felt? Did you feel
Yeah, do you know what? That's lovely that you said that, because I was so public. I was contacted by a lot of people who were very angry, and they thought that promoting the idea of fighting the people who did it was something that I needed to hear, or they felt that they were perhaps being supportive by doing that. And it was never, you're the first person to acknowledge this. Actually, what someone who's in a lot of pain then, and a vaccine injured person would need, was actually support in healing. It wasn't support in fighting, because every single day and every moment we felt like we were fighting our own bodies. We didn't have anything in us to be able to fight anywhere else, but we were being told we should be fighting. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, it's fascinating. I'm actually curious to explore that dynamic more now, because actually, we were talking about there's an event happening, the COVID Day of Remembrance. I forget the actual name.
Day of Reflection.
Day of Reflection, not Remembrance. And a lot of vaccine injured would not be able to attend such a demonstration because they're not physically in the position to be able to. How have the vaccine injured felt about those like myself who've gone out and taken on the fight? Is that something that's been welcomed, or have almost been craving that we support you in other ways? How's that felt over the last few years? You can be honest. I'm sure it'd be different for everyone, but how did it feel for you?
Right, yeah, it is different for everybody. For me, none of that was helpful.
Right,
I have to say. I know that the intentions probably were good, but none of it was helpful. I go back to a life for me before the vaccine. So I was very involved in a community that was affected by the tsunami in 2011, Japanese tsunami, and I was helping them for many years. And my mantra there was, "What do you need?" It was every time I went to this village, I would say to the people there, "What do you need?" Because that's what I believed was the right thing to do. If I wanted to help them, it had to come from them. And nobody knew what they needed better than the people themselves. And throughout the last, for me, 4 years, I have not heard that question once posed to our community.
right.
Nobody comes to the vaccine injured and says, "What do you need?" And if we really want to help anybody, and this applies to any kind of situation, we were talking about other, personal things earlier on, and what you say to anybody who's going through pain is, "What do you need?" And let them tell you. And if they don't know, because sometimes things happen where we don't know what we need, then all you do is just sit and you ask it again another time, and you ask it again another time, and you let them know that they're not forgotten and that somebody cares. What do you need? And you just keep doing that.
How's that been as a shared experience amongst yourself and other vaccine injured? Have you found ways to find methods to meet those needs that you had throughout the various phases?
We have. Firstly, in terms of coping mechanisms, we've developed a really sick sense of humour where we just like, "Oh, here's somebody else that thinks this about the vaccine injured, or thinks we need this, or this is, people coming in." So you find a way of kind of dealing with it that's appreciative and gracious, but actually that's not going to help at all. But in terms of, we found coping mechanisms, people need to feel connected, so not isolated, first and foremost. So we've done a lot where we connect. We give people opportunities to connect. So because most people can't leave their homes, then a lot of things that we do are online. So we have opportunities for people to connect, and we do Zoom events. The things that we can all do to manage the emotional impact. So especially if people have been living with it for 4 years now, that's a long time to be basically not being able to leave your house or leave your bed in some cases. So we do a lot of things like kind of healing events, I suppose, that are online, like sound baths, and we do a lot of we have a tapping event that happens quite regularly. We have had healthcare presentations from people who are in all sorts of different areas of healthcare, and we just started that this week. Actually, we're doing a speaker series where along the theme of my health in my hands, and each of our members who have really taken control of their own healing, they are then giving a presentation about what they have done to help themselves heal. And it's not just about the treatments that they've been exploring, but it's about developing that attitude of how do we take control of our own health now. So we try to fill in the gaps where we can. We've also done, we communicate with MPs on behalf of their constituents, so to get them to offer them support. We've communicated with GPs, we've spoken to media. We try to fill in all of those gaps. So we have needed people to go out and represent us. And as some of us have got better over time, we speak for the ones who are still there. I feel like I've come quite far in the last 4 years, and now it's my responsibility to speak for the people who are still there.
Yeah. When you say we and you're talking about the group, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about the group that you're...
So UKCV Family. So UKCV Family was set up initially as a Facebook support group by Charlotte Crichton, and it was just about UK for people who were dealing with mostly healthcare, because the healthcare system is so different in the UK than it is in America. So there were lots of international support groups, but Charlotte wanted to set one up that was specifically for the UK. So initially it was just the online support group. We've had a few in-person events for those who are able to meet up, but mostly everything's online. And then in February last year, we were granted charity status. So thank you. We're a registered charity in England and Wales. I'm the chair of trustees, and we represent about 3,000 people. I think the number's 2,000 or 2,500 are injured themselves, and then the rest are either bereaved or carers. So we take care of, it's roughly about 3,000 people.
Wow, my goodness.
And we know there are more. I mean, every time there's any kind of mainstream media flurry of attention about vaccine injury, then we tend to have a lot of people find us. And also every time there's a booster campaign,
right,
we have we basically deal with the fallout of all of it.
My goodness. What proportion of the group are kind of in a debilitative state that you kind of alluded to? Can't leave their homes?
That's a good question. I'm not actually sure how many people, a percentage. That would be a little survey to do amongst our members.
I think the perception that's been created in the public is that these side effects are not only rare but very minor, and I think it's important that people recognise, for those who haven't been paying attention, that there are much more severe reactions that have occurred.
Yeah, we're not about side effects. Our members aren't people who've had side effects. Side effects are, a bit of a sore arm and maybe feeling a bit fluey for a couple of days, maybe a headache. Though we wouldn't describe our members as people who've had side effects. And this is something that often we get dismissed. People use that terminology often to dismiss, I got a sore arm too, can I join your group, kind of thing. These are not people who've had a sore arm. I never had a sore arm. I didn't even feel the needle go in at all. It's not about a side effect. This is about long-term, severe, life-limiting, life-impacting condition that affects any part of your body, usually multiple parts of your body, and severely impacts your ability to live the same life that you lived before. That's not a side effect.
No, far from it.
No.
I think, and it's
a disability.
Right. I think this is kind of where I wanted to go to with this point, because I don't believe in the public sphere of awareness that this is recognised, that there are people that have suffered in this way, or it's presented as an outlier as opposed to the fact that there's thousands of people suffering in this way. I think it's so important that people do understand that there are people's lives who have been dramatically affected or even lost as a result of this issue.
There are, and I do think that the awareness has improved, but I don't think people fully understand the level at which some of us have been affected. So they know of something, but the actual knowledge, and even, I mean, most people who are aware of it, when they've read the Bree's book about Bree's story, they've said to me, I knew about vaccine injuries, I was aware about them, I had absolutely no idea what that actually meant. And these are people who are aware. So I think that the level of how much of your life it affects your, it's not just your body, but your family, your relationships, your friendships, your profession, your finances, all of it. It affects all the different parts of your life.
Yeah, it's so tragic. I mean, it's so hard to, it's just even hard to fathom. I think many of us who have been fighting the kind of corruption and the injustice of it have lost sight of the human component, which is actually the most important part. It's what we're fighting for. But unless we connect with those human stories, then we're simply fighting an empty vessel in a way. And it's important that we continue to humanize this situation and recognize that there is a whole world of suffering that this represents.
It's still happening now. I mean, the people who reached out 4 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago and either connected with individuals who were public in the vaccine injured community or with vaccine injured organisations themselves, and they contacted us 3 or 4 years ago and wanted to somehow support us or wanted to, be connected. We don't hear from them anymore.
Right.
And we're still in that situation. We're still fighting the same things that we were dealing with 3 or 4 years ago. They've moved on to other things that they're find more interesting now. But and so you're right, the humanity, it's like what were you fighting for? What are you fighting for? There are still people really suffering. And even just simple things, if you know of people who, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but if you know of people who are struggling, just offer to do their shopping. Just really simple. It doesn't have to be a big thing, don't have to change the world, but you can change the world for that one person by just doing their shopping.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, again, it's recognizing where the people are at and what they need, as you said. I know there'll be people thinking this, and I'm thinking this. Is there how much of you, or is there a part of you that wants to go and find justice for what's happened? I know that you talk about looking forward and what you can do, but is there a part of you in the group who wants to make sure this never happens again, that Pfizer, AstraZeneca, the Modernas of the world are punished for what happened? Is there a form of justice that can even come from this? Are you seeking that?
Personally,
Yeah, I
think justice, it depends what your definition of justice is, isn't it?
Well, I know there's a lot of anger relating to this, and there's a big difference between justice and vengeance, and revenge. But justice, what would justice mean to you as an individual?
That's such a good question. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. I think, and again, it goes back to that I've been so focused on my health and managing my health and improving my own quality of life, and then trying to improve the quality of life of others. And there isn't a huge amount of space there to be fighting these other people. I think that there are so many people who have been affected that justice, whatever that might be, it will come at some point. It may be very, very, very far down the line, the same way that people who were affected by thalidomide or the contaminated blood scandal or any other issues that they take decades, don't they? For things to come about, for justice to come about, and they happen when the politicians who were around while decisions were made have gone, and there's a whole new generation of politicians, and there's a whole new generation of healthcare workers that are trained differently than the ones that have been trained in the last 5 years. So it takes time because the people who have all been related to this, they're gone. and the new people who come about will have a very different approach. And I think that will happen. So I kind of have, it's almost like I have faith that's going to happen at some point. So my personal role is to make sure that the stories are shared with compassion and respect, and to reach out to people who perhaps aren't aware or have forgotten the side of humanity, the side of humanity to all of this kind of story. And that's why I think writing Bree's book is very appealing to me, and speaking to people about it, and everywhere I go, I find an opportunity to be talking to people about it, no matter what their beliefs are. And I'm happy to talk to people who have completely different beliefs to me, because we can always find something that interesting to share, and I can share a perspective about vaccine injury that perhaps a lot of people don't have. So through continued communication with compassion and respect and a genuine desire to learn, that will all bring about justice in the end as well.
Yes, it makes sense. I suppose, again, it's so different trying to empathize fully with your own experience that you've been through the healing journey, and that there's not even the mental space to think about justice. It's I've got to recover, and then it's almost like the life raft. I need to then turn to the person next to me and make sure that they are safe and being looked after. But I'm trying to connect. Was there a point of time where you were just in blame? Have you gone through that cycle of?
Yeah, I mean, but I blamed myself.
Before we continue, I want to let you know that in order to sustain this show, we're now partnering with brands that truly represent the values that we stand for. Ultimately, with the goal of helping you to discover products and services that can make a difference to the quality of your life, whilst helping us to grow the impact of our show. Have you noticed the financial world is shifting? Inflation is eating away at savings, banks are becoming harder to trust, and central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, are looming on the horizon, threatening to erode financial autonomy as we know it. If you've been thinking about crypto as a way to protect your wealth, but feel overwhelmed, worried about scams, or confused by all the technology, then you're not alone. This is exactly why we created the Navigating Digital Assets course, a fully updated, beginner-friendly course designed to help you to securely navigate the world of crypto and digital assets with confidence. This course has already helped over 500 people to gain clarity on how crypto works, how to invest safely, and how to secure your assets in an ever-changing financial landscape. With holistic guidance, jargon-free explanations, and £197 worth of bonuses, this course will give you the tools and confidence to navigate this paradigm shift in finance. And as a follower of this show, you can get 40% off the regular price and enroll for just £29. But don't wait, this offer will end soon. Visit danastingregory.com/NDA today and take the first step toward protecting your wealth and securing your financial independence. You'll find the link below this content.
I didn't spend a lot of time blaming other people, actually. I blamed myself, which is why when people who are unsympathetic towards vaccine injured people, and they say, well, you deserve it, you're an idiot, you went and got jabbed, you should, what do you expect, you deserve everything that you get. When you see that kind of commentary online, you think, well, I've said all of that to myself. I don't need you to be saying that to me. You say that, we blame ourselves more than anyone, and that's a really hard thing to live with. You made that choice. We didn't have to go there and have that, but we did. And finding a way to forgive yourself for making that decision, that's really hard. But I've done that now. I did it for very good reasons. Most people chose to get that injection and any other pharmaceutical intervention. Most people, particularly when it comes to vaccines, they do it for good reasons. They do it because of a love for humanity. the same way that people who are against all of it and have been very angry, and you do it for a love of humanity as well. So the people who got jabbed did it for a love of humanity. The people who didn't did it because they loved humanity. And we all want the same kinds of things, basically.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of energy in that point. It's very hard to connect with that retrospective now, looking back, but I can completely empathize with what you're saying. You know, now that we're 5 years on, we've got so much information. You can see that choice, but it's still very difficult to come to terms with, of the gravity of the problem that's happened and what people have had to deal with. And it's so fascinating being on the completely other side of the discussion, feeling completely different set of feelings about the same thing.
Okay, and it's related to what you mentioned about anger earlier on, and I think we all have the choice to create the world that we want to live in. And anger's not something I particularly want around me or in the world that I live in. So I will create that, and the world that I try to live in. I don't always do it. Don't get me wrong. I don't at all. And you know, I can swear that with the best of them, and
Even in our books, I'm swearing.
Yeah. So don't
Put it on the shelf over there somewhere.
Don't get me wrong at all. But on the whole, I choose to live in a world that I want to live in, a world that is kind and loving and respectful and full of people that support each other. And if I want to live in that world, it has to start with literally this little world that I live in here.
Yes, I agree.
So there isn't space in that world for anger.
I opened up the discussion around, you know, is the world still in denial? I'm curious what the most bizarre response you've had to your story. What kind of reactions do you have? I mean, at this...
See, now people are sympathetic. They're just understanding on the whole. So it's been quite a long time that people have responded in an unkind way.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah, no, it is. And I remember the very first response I had. I posted something when I was lying in the hospital bed, and I said, turns out that I've had a reaction to the COVID vaccine. And the first response was, I hope that doesn't put anyone off having theirs. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, why? Because I was so vaccine ignorant, I didn't even know that it would bring about that kind of a response from somebody. But I just remember being really hit with the lack of compassion in that comment. So that to me is, anything that shows a lack of compassion is a bit bizarre. And I did have somebody walk on the other side of the road from me before, who used to, so I found that was a bit bizarre. And actually I did have somebody kind of take a step back as well when I said I was vaccine injured. They took a step away from me and I said, well, it's not catching. And so there were a few things like that happened, but they honestly, they don't happen much at all. And interestingly, some of the people who responded like that in the beginning, they have over the years shown so much kindness, actually. And I think we need to create the space for people's own understanding to evolve, and that understanding doesn't necessarily evolve if we shut them out of our lives. So if we keep that doorway open, and if we keep communicating kindly and gently, and they keep seeing us and what we're going through, over time, I think their feelings change. And this definitely happened with me. I think people saw how much I was putting into recovery, and the food I was eating, and the all sorts of different things that I was doing. Some people considered to be quite extreme, but they saw my absolute commitment to it, and also a commitment to supporting other people who were suffering. And I think over time, their feelings about what I was going through changed, because I've had a lot of people kind of turn around and actually they were afraid, at the beginning, and maybe people still are afraid. They're afraid about what might be happening with their own bodies. But over time, they've turned around with kindness and support, and I do feel very supported now.
I'm very pleased to hear that. It's powerful to know what, and I think that's probably been self-created by the attitude that you've taken. For taking personal responsibility for not only your own healing but the way you communicate and deal with the situation. So,
and I think anger's got another part to play in that. Nobody wants to keep talking to someone who's really angry. Listen to that person; they're just yelling all the time, seeing damage. So if you be protein, gentle, jab, anger. People they don't want to know. And people have been angry about vaccines and about all sorts of things related to this topic for decades. And they walk around now saying, I've been talking about this for decades and nobody's listening to me. Maybe change the way you're communicating about it. It's like when people go to another country and they start speaking English there. Nobody's understanding me. I'll just speak louder. They do the same thing about vaccines. And so, no, maybe just try and speak that other person's language. And usually that language is a gentle, loving language.
Fascinating. You're absolutely right. Basics of being a human didn't really come with a guidebook, but maybe we should write one. How to be human in a day of polarization and madness. The COVID vaccine inquiry, the COVID inquiry, the vaccine module was postponed.
Yeah.
Initially, at that point, had you been approved as a core participant when it was first due to be heard?
Yes, I believe we had.
Yes, and then what was your response when it was pushed back?
Oh, we were very disappointed in that.
I'm guessing it didn't come as a surprise, though.
I think I can't quite remember now, but I do remember there being a lot of disappointment, and Charlotte and I have, and some of the others kind of admins and people who run the group, we've developed over the last 4 years this kind of attitude that things happen when they're supposed to happen. And again, it goes to protecting your energy and your health. There's no point, you can't get wound up about things. You have to, to some extent, go with the flow a little bit. And we have developed a bit of a habit of now having faith that things will happen at the right time. And so we were disappointed, but ultimately that's how we looked at it.
And then what was your experience like? You were in the room as a participant. You got to contribute. How was the overall experience as part of the inquiry?
Well, I attended almost every day of the 3 weeks, and if I wasn't there, I was watching all of it online. The experience when you're in the room is really quite different from what it is like when you're watching online, and there are things that you pick up on that you wouldn't know if you were watching it from home. And things like, for example, this is the kind of the top one, I suppose, of things that people watching from home wouldn't be aware of. The AstraZeneca representative, Justin Green, he was, when he walked into the room, he was followed by 4 lawyers, and the 4 lawyers sat just a few feet away from him, not in the camera's view, so you wouldn't have known. And they sat there and they did not take their eyes off him the entire time while he was questioned. Well, he wasn't questioned, actually. He was the only one for whom there were no questions permitted. So that was quite interesting. His answers were very short, and the whole energy about that was quite different. Maybe it was the fact that there were these 4 lawyers kind of standing there staring at him. So that was quite interesting. The conversations that went on in between, so at the break time, so there were conversations between barristers and members of the public gallery, core participants, and those conversations were generally very sympathetic towards vaccine injured. So I felt that we were supported by quite a few of the other barristers there, and quite a few of the core participant groups, actually. But what was really unexpectedly lovely about the inquiry, which was quite challenging being there. But what was unexpectedly lovely was there's a viewing room, and it's kind of a breakout room if it was a bit too much in the room there. Like if you got circulation issues, then I would sit for a certain amount of time and then need to go move in there. And other members of the public would be there as well who were core participants, and there were people who'd lost loved ones who because of COVID, and so the COVID bereaved had presence there. And we were told when we first got involved in the inquiry that there may be groups who had a real conflict of interest. So there may be groups there who would be saying that the vaccine should have been rolled out sooner and more risks should have been taken. And then there were people like us who were clearly saying perhaps more safety checks should have been put in place. So coming from very different perspectives, and that could cause conflict. It wasn't. We were so kind to each other. We were so, somebody said they'd lost somebody to COVID. Instead of questioning that, it's just saying, I'm so sorry. That's all you need to say. You might think whatever you want to think, and somebody else might say they're vaccine bereaved, and somebody might be thinking, was it vaccine or was it COVID? But instead, all you said was, I'm so sorry. And there was just this level of compassion and kindness that you would never see on the TV. And that was actually the reality of what was going on outside of what was being recorded. It was really interesting. The whole process was fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible because we would never get to see any of that. What about the stuff that we did see? What about the level of questioning? Do you think there was an adequate job of questioning?
No, of course not. No. So
before you answer, do you think there was even a sincere desire to understand what happened within the inquiry? Were they looking for truth? Were they looking for answers?
No. So it became apparent to me that the purpose of the inquiry was threefold. One was to increase the number of clinical trials in the UK as opposed to overseas. Another was to increase the amount of vaccine manufacturing in the UK as opposed to overseas. And the third one was to increase the number of arms into which needles could be put in the UK. So
that's the objective of the... Wow.
My perspective,
yes,
having watched very carefully everything that was going on for the 3 weeks and being there in person, those were the three themes that were coming along for the whole of the 3 weeks. And some of the core participant groups were chosen because it's called minority groups, and their take-up of the vaccine was low compared to other groups. And so the conversations around those groups were very much focused on what can we do to get these groups have more vaccines. And it all came down to trust. So there was a lot of conversations about trust and how can we improve trust. And I think that Vaccine Injured, we really only had a seat at the table because we can't really be ignored. If you want to do any more of those things, if you want to have more clinical trials and vaccine manufacturing and more vaccines in general, you can't ignore the fact that when this mass vaccination rollout has happened, there's a rather large number of people now who are injured, and we need to be able to do something to deal with them. And I think that probably was the only reason that we had a seat at the table. Now, having said all of that, that's what the inquiry, that module, the purpose of that module seemed to be that. I felt that it was completely out of touch with reality and with what I see among the general public. And this goes back to your original question about how things changed in the last 4 years. And people's awareness about vaccine injury now has changed. It has people, I think that I don't think that trust is going to be repaired. I think it's beyond what the inquiry can do, actually. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think there are going to be generations who talk about their mother, their father, their auntie, their grandma, who, you know, one minute they were full of energy and they were playing with them, and, you know, they remember when they were little, oh, my grandma used to do this for me, and then something happened and she suddenly became sick for the rest of her life. And there will be generations who remember this, and they will pass on those stories to their kids. That's not the kind of thing any government policies can just change.
No, and continuing to suppress information, deny these harms is only going to further reduce trust.
Well, I think about denying the harms. This was quite interesting about the inquiry. Nobody denied the harms. None of the expert witnesses that were called, when they were asked to talk about adverse reactions, they all acknowledged that they happened, all of them. When Matt Hancock was asked by our barrister, firstly, do you acknowledge that vaccine harms exist? He said, this was a little bit difficult to be in the room when he said this. He was very flippant when he said, yes, of course they exist. They were in the trials.
Gosh.
And so there wasn't, but I tried to focus on, okay, that's reassuring. There's an acknowledgement. And that was a thread throughout the inquiry. Nobody pretended that we weren't there. So I'll take that as a win.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of me is just like, and you just carry on anyway. Don't worry, would ignore it. I mean, did you get to submit evidence? Did you get to, yeah?
Yeah, so we submitted a very, very large witness statement that a whole group of us worked on, and that is in the public domain now. And we so that can be downloaded from the inquiry website. Anybody can read it. I'd encourage everybody to read it. We had, I think, 200 case studies of our members we submitted, and we submitted a supplementary witness statement. It was huge. The material that the witness statement that we submitted was massive. It's all there, and every day we have a Friends of UKCV Family Facebook page, and little quotes from our witness statement go out every day, because once that module was done, we worked on this document a year and a half ago.
Wow.
And once it was in the public domain and the inquiry had released it, we can now share it and encourage people to read it and send quotes. So I'd encourage everybody to read it.
So all that effort that's gone in to create that, what level of attention did it get within the actual process itself?
So we are told that, well, firstly, all of the witness statements were studied by the inquiry team. So we submitted it a year and a half ago. They had about a year to study it. And then all of the witness statements from other witnesses were sent to everybody else within that module. And then we were given a few days to respond to that. So we had a lot of time on that. And then, so we're told that we are assured that it will be studied in great detail.
Can't help but feel that skeptical feeling inside of me. But at least it's on the public record.
We have to see. Yeah. So I try not to speculate the things, but we'll see what happens when the inquiry report comes about. We'll see what happens then. But people can read it all for themselves. It's all there.
We'll link it up in the notes if you're interested. So do look out for that. As we will this book, which I'd like to talk about now, because this is an incredible piece of work that you've put together here.
Thank you.
And I think the first thing I noticed right from the opening is that it tells a story. So many of us in the last few years have tried to communicate through numbers and statistics and graphs and charts and science, unpublished science often because it won't get published. Yet right from the outset, this hits the human heart. In fact, it tops and tails with the human heart in such a powerful way. And actually, the closing part of this book very much reflects, I think, the ethos that you've embodied in our discussion today, which is about seeking compassion, seeking to be the type of person we want to see in the world and create the type of change we want to see, and have that be the torchbearer for how we deal with these situations in the future. But what was your motive for putting together this book? How did you come into contact with Brie and her story?
So somebody, a couple of months after I'd been injured, so this would have been about the May 2021, I think, I had done enough research myself to realise that things were not as they seemed. But I'd also worked out very quickly that people didn't, at that time, they didn't want to know. So I had to find another way of communicating about things. And my standard thing, what I used to say was, if you're interested, go read the clinical trial data. Because I'd read the clinical trial data by then, and there was enough questions in there for me to realise something wasn't right. So I said, just go read the clinical trial data. And then somebody responded and said, but the clinical trial data's it's not accurate. And I was also, I was a little bit fed up of people claiming all sorts of things. Like, people claim lots of different things, and they're as guilty of fear-mongering as the people who were fear-mongering about COVID, to be honest. So I thought, right, I went back at that and said, okay, who is it? What's wrong with the clinical trial data? And she said, I know somebody who was dropped because they had an adverse reaction. Oh, okay. Do you know them personally? No, but I am connected to them. Okay, would you introduce me? But they did, and I wasn't expecting any of that. And I think I was a little bit defensive at that time too. That was probably where I was at my angry stage. This was around then. Who is it? So he introduced me to them. And they did. And so I messaged her and I said, are you available for a chat? And she didn't have to say yes. Knowing her as I know her now, she was bombarded at that time with people, but she did agree to talk to me. And this has been something that I've done throughout this whole process, is if I need to work out if somebody's telling the truth by having an actual interaction with them, rather than somebody said. No, I'm going to just make my decision about this. So I wanted to have that connection with Breathe, and I just asked her about the clinical trial data, and about her experience with the clinical trial, and she told me, and it blew my mind. What she told me, I couldn't believe this was true. And I think we connected because I like swearing, and so I think she quite liked this Brit with a bit of.
Well, I was going to say, this is context. She's from the US, right?
Yeah, so America, an American. She didn't swear publicly very often, and there was this Brit that was just full of it and didn't care. And so we connected in that way, and we just kept in touch ever since. And then she set up React 19, the global group. So we're part of a global coalition that she set up, where representatives of vaccine injury support groups from all over the world, we are all part of a group where we share information all the time. And last year, at this time last year, she said to me, would I be interested in writing this book? And I jumped at the chance, and there were a few reasons why I jumped at the chance. I felt like, again, this goes back to anger, actually. I felt like we couldn't afford to have somebody communicating a vaccine injury story full of anger. It needed to be written very, very carefully. And she actually asked me to write it because of the way that I'd been communicating publicly about vaccine injury, and also because of my own memoir that I wrote about the tsunami survivors. So I suppose, had developed a way of communicating about deeply tragic events in a way that was compassionate, and a way that encouraged the reader to want to keep reading, even though they were reading about something really awful, they just somehow couldn't put this book down. So she wanted me because of that. And I felt like I can do this, and I can do this in a way that will reach more people than if it was done with anger. And the other reason I really wanted to do it was I felt like for it to be the book it needed to be, Brie needed to feel comfortable sharing the deepest, darkest moments we have all had who've been vaccine injured. And she needed to share that with somebody who wasn't going to exploit it, but with somebody who was going to hold her very, very gently through that process. And so I, as a friend, I kind of wanted to protect her through that. I didn't want her to, share all of that story and then just be, okay, got the story. Thanks very much, which is what often happens it does. But instead it would be somebody that, okay, she's telling me something that's, really deep, vulnerable things that she's never even told her family. So everything just needs to stop right now, and we need to just pay attention to that moment and just be human, not writer and subject. And so there were a lot of different reasons why I wanted to write it.
And it doesn't need the anger for you to go, what? I mean, there is so many what, like moments like I'm sure you had when you first met her. The shock of the story itself does the talking, frankly. The experiences that she's gone through and continue to go through invoke that feeling in you. You don't need to use the word in such a way that generates more anger, but it will palpably still make you have a response to the words. What was most shocking about her story for you personally, as you got to know her experience through the trial and how she subsequently had to go through various avenues to get help? The almost abandonment from the pharmaceutical companies. What shocked you most about her story?
I don't know about being shocked, because my own experience was enough for me. None of it's going to shock Vanessa. Honestly, nothing about how they get treated, or from all sides. The shock's done. But I think the bit I didn't know much about was I didn't know that the NIH actually was researching them. There was a small group of them that were being researched and treated through the NIH in secret. But the NIH, when asked by media or anybody else, are you treating the vaccine injured? Are you working with the vaccine injured? They said they weren't. So I think that was the most disappointing, maybe, rather than shocking. But that was because we haven't had that happen here. All of the other things in there, I can say it's happened to me personally, or
You've seen it.
People close to me, this has happened. But that level, that's another kind of gaslighting, isn't it?
What's your ultimate hope for the book? What do you want it to achieve?
I hope that, and this goes with everything that I do in terms of advocacy, is I hope that nobody ever has to go through any of that if they are injured by any vaccine ever again. They never have to do that alone. They are never treated the way that we've been treated. I just hope nobody else ever has to go through any of that again.
And there's a particularly strong chapter in here which comes with a warning at the outset, and we'll give a warning now, but there's a chapter 4, which talks about the depths it's taken people to, where they've taken their own lives. Was it a difficult decision to include that in the book?
No, it had to be included. I felt very strongly about that. So chapter 4 and the very last chapter 15, those two are weirdly my favorite chapters. Chapter 4 is one of my favorite chapters in the whole book. It's such a raw chapter. And I've been there. we did a survey of UKCV family members, and 76% of our members have considered suicide. That's a very, very high percentage of a group of any chronically ill people. And it was essential to be in there. It had to be in there. We have to be open and honest. And Brie is incredibly brave for being willing to allow that part of the experience to be out in the public domain like that. But we have to do it. Those of us who are coming through on the other side, we have to talk about those depths of darkness, because there are people who are still now in that darkness, literally at this very moment. And it's not just about people who are vaccine injured. I mean, anybody who's been to that dark place and suicidal thoughts and you know, the depth of it, perhaps that chapter might speak to them. When you learn that other people have felt exactly the same, like in every detail, the way that you felt, then it feels less scary. It's not so big, is it? You're not the only one with all of this going on. And perhaps it might help people who have got loved ones who are struggling with that and they don't really understand it. And ultimately, perhaps it offers some kind of support or comfort to people who have lost loved ones and still don't quite understand. This is actually what's going on. That entire chapter is what's happened to those people.
What role has this book played in your own healing, and do you think it can support others in their own healing journey by reading this?
Oh, that's a really big question, actually, and I might get a little bit emotional about that. Because in my healing journey, writing that book gave me a reason to live for me. So until that point, I think I've been keeping going and trying this treatment and trying this and trying that, but I've been doing it for other people. I've been doing it for my mum and my niece and the people, and Charlotte too, actually. We have a little pact. We're just going to keep going. And but I was doing that for other people and for my dogs. I have rescue dogs and they only have me. So I was doing it all for them. And it was when she asked me to write that book, I started thinking I can live for me again. So it actually played a really big part in my healing journey. Thank you for asking that. Other people in their healing journey, then I think it helps them feel less alone. And the feedback, actually, I've heard this from quite a few people, is from other injured, is that it gives them encouragement to know that there are people that are fighting for them and that Brie is out there. And I had quite a few people say that they didn't know Brie and I knew each other. So they knew of Brie because they'd heard of her, but they're in the UK, so they knew of me, but they didn't know we knew each other. And it gave them joy to know that we were collaborating on something. So that was really lovely.
You probably still get that and you'd be like,
So I think it can help people just to know, again, comes back to that thing, you're not alone and you are not going to be alone. You are not going to be left alone. You might feel abandoned by friends, family, even from, doctors, from all sorts of people, but you will not be abandoned by us.
I think the other thing as well, both your story and hers, that come through in this, really, even though you present this as the author, I think it shows a level of resilience that will inspire others to keep going no matter what. That was very clear in her story. There was a piece, I can't remember the exact words, but it's if I can still breathe, I can still eat, it was boom, 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 then I can heal. And it's just that mantra. And I think other people, as it illustrates in the book, have gone to the depths. And sometimes it takes that almost contagion of resilience, that leadership, the role modeling of what it takes to be resilient in the face of not only the actual injury itself, but all the emotional, mental, psychological elements of this, to inspire others that they can also find that resilience inside of themselves. So it's not only feeling that they are part of something where there are others who are going through a similar experience, but they also have someone that is shown what's possible in terms of their own healing or recovery. I know that you tend to avoid that term, but I think that's something that comes through very strongly in this book as well, in terms of building that resilience. And I think that's such an important part of why this book is a necessary component, not only for people who are seeking to learn about this period in history and what really happened, but also for those who are seeking support on their path.
Thank you.
I want to talk briefly about the process of writing this. I mean, was this just like endless Zoom calls, and were they recorded? How on earth do you go from that point of we'll do this to this?
Yeah, it was intense, really intense. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was such an honor to work on it. It had to be done very quickly, first of all. So there was a certain deadline that the publisher wanted, and it had to get done really quickly. So it was Brie would send me all sorts of I actually, she said, I wanted a book and I wanted it to be, this is a rough idea about the content. Honestly, I went to bed that night, I woke up, and this is when you feel like there's something else in the world that you're just channeling.
Yes.
And I went to bed and I woke up and the entire structure had written itself in my head. Well, like there's 15 chapters, because it's structured.
Well, it's got quite a specific structure, the 3 sections, and then even the way you write the chapter. I was just reminding myself then, because you've got everything in the first one's the trial, the reactions, the experts, then it's the going public, getting political, and the last one is finding allies, finding treatments, finding science, finding the money, and there's such a flow to it in that sense and an order. So
that did itself.
Wow.
I woke up and it was just there.
Yeah.
And I emailed her the next day and I said, I've just got the entire structure
Amazing.
of the book.
Like literally the next day after you talked.
Yeah. And from then on, it was, okay, this is in this chapter. And I knew exactly what needed to be in the chapter. And I would, she would just be sending me loads and loads and loads of stuff. And I would always know when she just had a steroid infusion. Right. You know that phrase when you hear somebody was on steroid?
Right, yeah.
Now I know what that means.
Okay.
Because I would wake up, because we're in the time difference, I'd wake up and there's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of words that she sent me. And I'm thinking, well, the chapter's only 5,000. You've just be dull that about one topic. Yeah. Because she just had a steroid infusion Anyway, so she would send me stuff and I would structure all of it and find a flow. And I would interview. We'd have these very intense interview sessions where I didn't record. Actually, I did record them, never ever referred to them, because part of the whole process for me was she would be just talking at me and I would just be typing. And there's something about that process that lodged itself in there.
Yeah.
Because then I would go to sleep another night and then spend 2 days writing solids, a whole chapter, and it would just all be flowing. So there was a bit of knowing what I wanted to do. There were certain points that I wanted to make, because those are the messages that I want to put out into the world about compassion and moving forward and the kinds of things that we talked about today. In chapter 15, the very last chapter, we didn't do any interview. I said to her, I know exactly what I want to do with this chapter. And she said, just do it. Yes. And then I wrote it, sent it to her, and she cried. So it was just done. I just knew what that needed to be. So the process was, it was beautiful. Actually, it was beautiful. I loved writing it. I'm really proud of it. I feel so honored to have been asked to have done it.
What's it like editing it down? I mean, it must have, having all that information, and there's so much. You could write volumes just on Brie's story, let alone everything around it.
You could, but you don't need to tell everything, right? And actually, this is, I think, where you get that little one step away from writing your own memoir. When I wrote my memoir about the Tohoku, about the tsunami survivors and my relationship with them, that memoir's massive. Because I just wanted every little beautiful moment of their lives to never be forgotten. That's how I felt about them. But I probably needed a little bit, the kind of distance, just one step away from writing somebody else's memoir, in effect. Just meant I knew what was the important stuff that needed to be said, exactly how many words it needed to be said in. So it was easy to do all of that. I wasn't rewriting anything she'd sent me. I was writing it from scratch, but I was drawing upon information that she'd sent me in order to put together something that it took her 10,000 words to put that into 500. So, yeah.
And I was delighted as this was published, because I was seeing on your social media, it's in the charts. Every day there was this new update, and it was doing really well, which is great to see that. And I was, cheering you on from the sidelines. But how's the reaction been to the book? What sort of response?
Fantastic. Every single review on Amazon is 5-star. Everyone. Incredible. I've been amazed. And that comes from people who are injured, love it for lots of different reasons, because they feel like it's their voice and their experience. The people who were vaccinated but not injured seem to love it because it has given them an insight into something which they didn't have much knowledge about before. And then the people who didn't get vaccinated and therefore not injured love it because they are learning something as well. And the most common thing I get from people like yourself would be, I thought I knew all about vaccine injuries until I read that book. And actually I realized there's so much more to it. So everybody seems to be getting something. And people, the most common thing I think everybody said is they can't put it down. So they don't expect it to be something where you just keep going. So the response has been amazing.
Wow. I'm so pleased that it's had that response. Have you sent it to notable people that need to read this? And can we start a renegade posting of these to MPs and
do it. Look,
public officials and public health bodies?
Yes, do it. I haven't, partly because there's been a bit of an issue with availability in the UK.
Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah, and it's not Amazon, I can say that. But there have been things in place that have prevented that, let me word this, the smooth availability. So I checked today, and today it is showing as being available. But I don't know how long that is going to happen for. So
today being the 6th of March. So whenever you're watching this, check now.
So I haven't been able to do anything like that too much, but I'm more than happy to. I have some copies that I've bought myself directly from the publisher that I have available here. So I'm happy to hear from anybody who would like to get involved in spreading the word somehow about it. That would be great. I know of somebody in America, she bought, I think, a carton, which is about 20 copies, I think, in a carton, and to send to a whole bunch of senators.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely.
Anybody who wants to do that, I think it's 18 in the carton. Yes. I can get them for you, and you can send them wherever you like.
Yes, get the book, read it, and realize that this is probably one of the most powerful. To me, that both this book and the conversation that we've had today, it feels like the missing link in actually what I describe as the kind of war on the pharmaceutical industrial complex. We cannot win it without the stories of those who have been affected. And it feels like we've spent so much time trying to win on the evidence without actually saying, well, hang on a minute, look at the real human stories. And I almost think I would like to, I'm going to go on a whole tangent, I won't go down there, but it's about featuring these stories. These stories must be heard. This is ultimately what's going to move people's hearts and their minds. So if we can find ways, and I encourage you to do this, get copies of this book, send it to your MP, send it to your public health officials, because we opened this interview today with a discussion, are people still in denial? And, I do agree that the world has moved forward since 2021, but there's still a heck of a lot of blind spots. There's still a heck of a lot of denial. There's still a heck of a grey area that we haven't yet permeated. And I think books like this, people like you, can help break that barrier. So get the book, read it yourself. I'm still going. I said to Caroline, I was sent 3 books, and I've got more down here, and it's mad how many books I get. But I was captivated by this story, Bree's story, and I desperately want to meet her as well, because she's just such an inspiration. So thank you for writing this book. Thank you for not only what you've done to support the injured, but the way in which you've done it, because I think that's so important in a world where we live in this tribalized, polarized, angry, resentful world almost. If there's no one shining a light for compassion and bringing that peaceful energy into the world that we want to see, then how on earth will the world change? How on earth will we actually deal with this?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. That said, it would be gaslighting of me to, if you are feeling angry, to say don't feel angry anymore.
No, everybody's entitled to their own feelings. Yes. This is just how I'm choosing to approach all of this.
Yes. And I do believe we can transmute any energy into a positive force. And there are tools that can help us do that. And we've all got to find our own way. But we are in this mad soup of a world that's this mental soup that I talk about. And we've got to find our own way to navigate it. But there are people out there who can guide us. And I consider you one of those people. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. And congratulations on the book. You've written quite a few books. Is there any more on the horizon? Have you got the itch again, or are you just going to let...
I've been approached by a few people it's that book. So
for more swearing books or for more serious books?
No, more. Yeah, I think my swearing. I think that helped get these through the. I was doing a lot of the sweary books.
You have to tell people what we're talking about.
So this was one of my coping mechanisms. Maybe this wasn't why I wasn't so angry. It was because I wrote a sweary notebook and a sweary planner.
Ingratitude journal.
An ingratitude.
I'm trying to see if I've got it on the shelf over there. No, it might not be. I think I've had this actually by my bedside.
You can get that on Amazon, actually. But the ingratitude journal, because what was it? The side. I'm fucking sick of looking on the bright sides, and that was what it was called. And a load of sweary stickers, and it just got me through so much. So that was So, but I'm very much through that phase. I won't be doing any more sweary stuff at the moment. But no, I'm going to be working on another book in a similar vein. So, yeah.
Watch this space.
Yes. Yeah.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me here today. For those of you at home, please do share this story. It's such a powerful discussion. Many of us have been paying very close attention to these stories, and probably you may find yourself like me, who've been so focused on the injustice, the numbers, the anger, the blame, that we miss the human story. And it's really important that we connect with that and embrace that and support those people like Caroline and those that she supported through her groups and Bree through her groups through React 19, because, well, if we don't, then what are we doing it for? And that is our shared humanity. So let me know in the comments what you thought of today's discussion. Please do share it. And particularly if you know someone that's been injured or affected by the vaccine rollout, then even more important that you share this episode with them and this book too. So thanks so much, Caroline, and thank you to everyone at home for watching this discussion.
Thank you.
Boom.
If this conversation moved you, then please share it. The stories of both Caroline and Brianne both deserve to be heard. Not just for them, but for the thousands still suffering in silence. If we want truth, accountability, and real change, then we have to be willing to speak up, and each of us has to play a role. You'll find links to Caroline's work, her community, and her powerful book, Worth a Shot, in the description below. Please do check it out. Grab a copy of the book. It's an incredibly powerful read. And when you're done, please pass that book on to your MP, because we must let the politicians and the political system know that we have not forgotten. And if you believe in the importance of conversations just like this, then please support our work. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're tuning in, please hit subscribe and follow. We're building something that matters, and this podcast is here to ask the hard questions, give a voice to the unheard, and challenge the narratives that we are sold. If you want to make sure you never miss an episode, then join our newsletter at danastingregory.com/podcast and help us to beat the algorithm and the censorship machine. Until next time, live free and prosper. My name is Dan Astin-Gregory, and I'll see you on the next episode.
I got quite emotional, actually. I didn't physically show it, but I was feeling very on the inside. Yeah, so it was. I almost had this like delayed welling up inside.